Hal Ginsberg, so excited to have you with us on this Wednesday, day after Trump indictment. We're going to talk about Donald Trump. Is he the worst president ever or not even close? Of course, I'm with Arlen Grossman, famous writer, pundit, Monterey Herald. And I said this before, Arlen, I think the Herald owes you at least, if not a columnist, regular 15-day paycheck, some kind of, I don't know, hourly for the time and energy you spend putting in great commentary in that Monterey Herald.
Well, thank you, Hal. I hope you'll talk to the editor, see what you could do about getting me a paycheck.
I've already in conversation with the editor. I've actually spoken to, not sure who they are, but I've already begun, I guess I should say, that process.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard to figure out the editor of the Monterey Herald. It's just kind of weird now. It used to be, people that you could really recognize and know, and they were there for a few years, but now it's just a big conglomerate. It's just not a regular newspaper like in the old days.
No, it's exactly right. You got it exactly right. And I actually do subscribe because I like to know what's going on in Monterey, and many of the viewers of Politics are in fact from that area. I still have some goodwill built from the years. Well, we did radio together. I did radio with a lot of folks out there. Arlen, you were certainly one of our stalwarts, our mainstays. Arlen and I have a massive, enormous disagreement. It's as big as the gulf between the current temperatures and those before the climate cataclysm that humans caused began. We're going to get into it in one moment. I just want to urge you, please do like and subscribe. We got 1,000 or so viewers last week, Arlen, when we had Sasha Stone on. So that was very exciting. The channel Politics is growing. We need you to like, we need you to subscribe. Also would note that we were unable to get a video of my good friend, Arlen's friend, David Cobb from the Green Party and many other groups on yesterday. That was the plan. David and I have rescheduled. It'll be this Monday. I'm going to do it in the afternoon. So the times aren't always 11 to noon. That's why I changed the Politics oval that you see there. Arlen doesn't see it. My guests do not see what my viewers see. That's why, Arlen, one of the reasons I didn't want folks on the Zoom call, which just the Zoom call is just for my speakers. If you want to call in and talk to us, there is a number. You can call it. It's right there on the screen for you, 240-363-7190. And now let's get into this debate. Is Trump the worst president ever? Arlen, you say yay. Do you want me to start with the Steve Schmidt video, which you provided to me? This was Arlen's evidence. Do you want me to start it, or do you want to?
I thought you said you don't have it available. Do you have it available?
Oh, no, you can see it. I absolutely have it available. The Steve Schmidt interview is what you request. That's what you can even see it. You can see it on your screen, Arlen. You see Schmidt's head there with a little YouTube icon. I'll start that when you ask me to, but you may want to make a quick intro.
All right, let's start with the intro. First of all, thank you for the kind words. It's always a pleasure to be on with you, and I'm glad to hear that your video cast is starting to grow, and I think it should, because it's good to talk about the things that are important, the news and what's going on in the country, and especially from a progressive point of view, because right now it seems like the right wing has all the strong media presence right now. With Fox News and all their imitations and all the websites, and the right wing is on the ascendance, unfortunately, and I think that's due in a large part to Trump, but we'll get into that. So
all right, so do you want me to play the Schmidt video then? Should we get right to that?
Sure, why not?
All right, here we go. Let's go. Mr. Schmidt. He is we missed it. Let me do this a little differently. I thought it was going to play when I hit one button. It didn't. Here we go. Steve Schmidt.
Are you surprised that so many people are in on that effort with him?
Well, look, at the end, Nicole, what's the rationale for the reelection? He's wrecked the country. He's done unbelievable damage. He didn't do it alone. He did it with his factotum. He did it with his collaborators and accomplices in the United States Senate. The lie he told is the biggest, most lethal lie in American history. 250,000 dead people. If the numbers were the same as Germany, we'd have 150,000 more of us alive. Shattered economy, schooling for every kid in the country's wrecked. America's way of life, our rituals as we begin or in the middle of the fall, it's all gone. So this is the most inept, the most maliced president. He's divided the country. His record is one of total failure. He's the greatest failure in the history of the United States. And I don't say that with hyperbole. It's not even a close contest. He's the worst president the country's ever had. So what we see now is we have intimations of violence should he lose. We have the vice president, the second highest official in the land, refusing just to say clearly that we'll have a peaceful transition of power, that the American people are in charge, that the American people decide who the president is, and that, of course, we're going to have a free and fair election. They can't bring themselves to do it. So what this is what you're seeing, this is a rancid, corrupt, autocratic ideology. It's not classically liberal. It's an amalgam of all of these discarded, toxic ideologies that are part of America's history, from the Dixiecrat movement, the Jim Crow movement, the segregationists. We have the militia movement in there. Trumpism is an extremist movement, and you're seeing extremists do what they do. He's planting the seeds for the stab in the back. He'll blame everybody. I'm sure that in Trump's mind, when he looks at how he got COVID, we saw it. Blame the Gold Star families. He looks at the American people and he thinks, wow, the American people, they're filthy. They infected me with COVID. They betrayed me. The reason he'll lose, the reason he'll step away from power, it'll never be his fault. It'll always be the conspiracy against him. And the danger we'll have in this country for some time is because of Trump, we're going to have 30% of the country that will never accept the legitimacy of the election. And here's the danger as we look ahead to the next election after this one. Used to be you want to run for president, you're in the Democratic Party, you go to Iowa, you give a speech establishing your liberal and progressive bona fides. You're a Republican, you do the same, talking to conservatives. But now all of these candidates are going to have to go express their conspiracy theory bona fides to the 30% of the country that will believe that the election was stolen from Trump. They're the majority of the Republican Party. And the direction, because of Trump, this is all trending in, is we have 180 QAnon candidates in 2020. Trust me when I tell you, we'll have 1,800 of them in 2022, and we might have 18,000 of them in 2024. So what Trump has set loose in the country is going to take a long time to get down, to get back underground, to get back in the box. But it is going down. Make no mistake about that.
Wow.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSN.
All right, Arlen, there you go.
Well,
That's what you
I'm
wanted
done.
to play.
I can leave now, Hal. He's covered it all. I love.
Well, he doesn't like to take breaths, does he? I mean, that was quite a 3.5-minute peroration by former Republican strategist Steve Schmidt, actually talking to a former George W. Bush spokesperson, Nicole Wallace. So I guess if you want to say the Republicans don't, at least establishment Republicans don't like him. I mean, remember, what was Schmidt worked for McCain, who was very, very obviously within the Mike, the military industrial complex. Wallace worked for the guy who started the war on Iraq on false pretenses. So we can see that they would be people who probably wouldn't like Trump, who did go after the military, at least when he was in campaigning,
Well,
pretty much
look what he
gave
did
him
with
free reign. But go ahead. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
if you
look
want
what
to
he
follow
did.
up a little bit, and I just want to say this. There was a lot of generalities there. There were very few specifics. There were specifics, some, and we can get into those. But generally, it was Trump's the worst, Trump this, Trump's turning the nation, Trump believes in conspiracy theories, some of which is true. But in the end, I don't really think it gets us into a fair comparison with specific presidents. If you're going to say, as you have said, Arlen, and as Schmidt said, he is easily the worst president, it seems to me, and maybe we just have very different ways of assessing best, worst, and middle of the road. I look at what the president actually did. How many people did he kill? How many people did he rescue from poverty? How many people did he impoverish? I say he because we still haven't had a woman president. How many people did he enslave? How many people did he free? Those are the kinds of questions that, did he leave the nation in a better place than when he came in? Did he leave it in a worse? Those are the kind of questions that I ask myself when trying to determine who are good presidents, bad presidents, who are indifferent presidents. It's very, very difficult because people are all a admixture. Even Trump, whom you've claimed has no redeeming qualities, and I'm quoting you directly, even he, in fact, is a mixture of good, bad, and indifferent. Some people have more bad. It's pretty hard to find much good in a Hitler or a Stalin. Probably you could if you really, really tried. But the great majority of us are, to some extent, good people, and sometimes we're not so good, and sometimes we're in the middle. So to me, I don't worry about so much, generalizations. I look at what they did. So from that standpoint, I don't believe Trump approaches the worst president. You seem to think he's easily the worst. I don't know if it's based on what he did or on those kind of generalizations we just heard.
Well, thank you, Hal, for giving me a chance to talk. I appreciate that. I was wondering if I ever would, but
you said, wait, I'm going to cut you off. You said you were done after I played Schmidt for 3.5 minutes. And you had nothing more to add. So I don't know. I didn't know I needed to give you more time.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, you mentioned John McCain, and look what Trump did to John McCain. John McCain is considered by most people to be a war hero, to sacrifice years of his life and in prison, and allowed others to go ahead of him to go home, and all the things. He was admired by the whole country, and Trump just decimated him, just made him out to be like the most horrible person ever. I mean, that was just one of many things.
Well, he said he was a loser because he was caught. I know he said that. And yeah, I'm not going to defend Trump's treatment or mistreatment of others. He was not nice to a multimillionaire. He was not nice to one of the most powerful men in the state of Arizona. He was not nice to a man who very rarely, if ever, said no to the Pentagon. I think that John McCain had many positive qualities, but I can't honestly be all upset because ultimately Trump was nasty to a fellow Republican. That just doesn't put him on a pedestal or put him below, at the bottom of the list of presidents, in my opinion.
Well, Trump is nasty to almost everybody. He doesn't have a kind word to say about too many people other than himself. He really likes everything that he does, and everything that his, the people that are loyal to him, he kind of likes. But then that's about it. He mostly has negative things to say about almost everything that doesn't involve what he wants, and what, that's just
it's true. He's not a nice person. Again, for me, metrics are what you do. I have this slide up. I wanted to respond, to the sort of criticism of Trump in general. I want to talk about, and that he did nothing good and has no redeeming qualities. So one thing that I think he did that actually was quite good was get us out of Afghanistan. It is true that the final withdrawal was based on actions taken, or was the result of action taken by President Biden, but he followed Trump's timetable. And I think it's fair to say that without Trump having been president, we likely, although not definitely, still be in Afghanistan. Trump may not be a nice person, but I would speculate, Arlen, perhaps incorrectly, that the service people who are no longer serving in Afghanistan and their spouses and children and parents are probably pretty happy to have them home right now.
Actually, I have mixed feelings about Afghanistan, because I look at the people there and the kind of life that they're living now, and the women and the females don't get a chance to go to school and, or work in good jobs. And, I don't know what the answer was, because we were there for 20 years and that's way too long. But, we should have figured out a way to get out of there, and I don't know, maybe have, people would have a chance to have a decent life. But that's another matter.
The country was completely hollowed out by the occupation. It was a corrupt government that had zero credibility. And if you want to blame people for that, blame George W. Bush and blame Barack Obama. It's just not fair to me to blame the current situation in Afghanistan on Donald Trump.
Well, there's a lot of blame to go around, obviously. They're just, almost every war that we've gotten into, well, almost every war since World War II has been a disaster. You know, Vietnam, Iraq, you name it. Every time we go into another country, we invade it. We, try to take overall, everything that they do and make them into looking like a capitalist, country like we are. And it's all gone wrong. It's all gone bad. We've pretty much lost everything that we do. And of course, millions of people have lost their lives and trillions of dollars have been spent worthlessly. So, foreign policy, American foreign policy is a real mess. And I'll give you that Trump was not the worst president when it comes to foreign policy, but I think as far as what he's done and the effect on this country, I think is easily the worst.
All right. Well, fair enough. So let's continue the conversation, obviously. In terms of the economy, I consider Trump, again, I'm going to give another example of where I think Trump made some good decisions. And I think that the tariffs that he implemented have been a positive. And I'll see if I can get that caption. Actually, I guess it's going to be a challenge. Maybe it says why Biden. So again, Biden kept, stayed with the Trump timeline when it came to withdraw from Afghanistan. He also maintained Trump's China tariffs. I thought when Trump debated Hillary Clinton that he had the better of the argument when it came to trade. Clinton has always been not completely a free trader, but mostly a free trader. And to the extent she did not support some trade deals, it appeared to be based on purely political pressure and calculation rather than her beliefs, her whatever core she might have. Trump, believes that we should protect American jobs. He believes we should protect American jobs with tariffs. And he actually, to a degree, not to the degree I would have liked, actually implemented them and brought some jobs back. There's a dispute. Maybe they created more jobs. Maybe they hurt the economy. I say they helped. I think it's always to the advantage of the American worker to make goods manufactured overseas more expensive, regardless of the response by the country that we're involved with, unless it's a fully developed first world nation where wages are comparable or even higher than the United States. Apparently, Joe Biden agrees. Joe Biden kept some of Trump's China tariffs in place.
Well, of course, Trump inherited Obama's economy. Obama came into the country when, our economy was falling apart. We were losing, hundreds of thousands of jobs, and he turned it around and he made the economy start moving forward. And, Trump pretty much carried on a lot of, what Obama left behind. But look at where we are now, Hal. I mean, our economy is all messed up. You have all the wealthy people doing great, and more homeless people, more and more people who are hungry, more and more people who are, desperately looking for some kind of a good life. And looking around me and looking around the country, I think we're in bad shape. And I think a lot of that has to, I think Trump has a lot of that responsibility.
All right. I will say in response that the Obama years did see the economy boom. But again, we saw a dual economy under Obama, where the rich got much richer and working people basically remained in place. I lived in Monterey during most of the Obama administration. And I will say this, the homeless problem did not become less severe. I walked and rode along the beach consistently for close to a decade, and there were always encampments, people along the beach, sleeping in tents, sleeping under palm trees. I remember the Occupy movement during the Obama presidency when Obama crushed it. So I am not going to say that Trump's policies were a major break from either what W did or what Obama did, except when it comes to free trade. And if you look at that headline there, that's from long after Trump left office, that China agreed as a result of Trump's trade war to increase purchases of U.S. goods and ag products. I assume you think that was a good thing. That was a good result, right? That China agreed to buy more goods from us.
Yeah, I suppose that's good. It can be good.
Well, I don't know how it wouldn't be good, and especially when you look at how badly China was eating our lunch when it comes to trade and the economy. Moreover, Trump was very clear that China was the real threat, not Russia. Seems pretty clear he was right there too. China, of course, with well over 1 billion people and bellicose in the South China Sea. We see Russia can barely even or can't even defeat a weak neighbor after a year of fighting. So I would say disastrous for that region, by the way. Again, Trump seemed to get the risk that China posed much more so than previous presidents like Obama and W., who treated China as at least an economic ally, even when they were taking our jobs by the millions. And you can see that Trump's was fears about China that they wouldn't meet their promise. They wouldn't keep the promise to buy more goods, came to a fruition, and that's why he had in there the stick as well as the carrot. If you don't buy those goods, then we're going to put the tariffs back on. And guess who agreed with him? Joe Biden.
Let's put China aside for now and just look at our entire economy as a whole. I mean, let's not forget when Trump came in, he pushed for a very big tax cut that helped the rich, and they've certainly benefited from that because the rich have gotten richer and richer, and the poor have gotten poorer and poorer, and there's just so much chaos in this country as far as hopes and dreams are just disappearing. The great American dream is gone. It's because all the money has shifted from the bottom to the top. And there's
I agree with you that income and wealth inequality is a huge problem, Arlen. No dispute whatsoever. I'm not going to say it's fair to put all that on Trump, and I'm going to get to I was going to talk about this at the very end of the call, but let's do it now since we've got the economy. And again, remember, we're talking about whether Trump is easily the worst president of all time. So you're talking about income and wealth inequality. Now, when we talk about tax cuts, and this isn't going to be on the slide, I'll get to the slide in a second. Reagan cut the top marginal tax rate from 70% to 28%. No tax cut since then has approached that in terms of the size, the percentage cut. So right there, Reagan is the worst when it comes to tax cuts. Reagan also imposed a middle-class tax hike in a number of areas, which also very seriously harmed the economy. As far as I know, Trump did not do that. I'm not going to defend. Many of the things Trump did were really bad. The point is, as I see it, the debate is he the worst? And are some of his actions at least defensible? So again, we're seeing tax cuts by other presidents, at least when it comes to Reagan, that are worse. Also, George W. Bush, who is on my list of the worst presidents, I'm going to go through three. We'll go from the 19th century Andrew Jackson to Richard M. Nixon, and then finish with George W. Bush. And I'm going to compare the three and say those three with Trump and why I believe they were worse. And also that even if you can sort of maybe claim that Trump is arguably as bad as any of them, it's far from clear, as you've said, that he's easily the worst. And we go back. Okay.
Yeah, I'll tell you why, Hal, I say that. It's not for all the reasons that you're saying. It's because he's poisoned this country. He's really ruined this country. He's taken an entire political party and made it his. And, he made 30% of the people part of his cult. And, and look at all the feelings that people have, all the hate that's going around, all the,
is it Trump's fault that people are so disgusted with the Democratic and Republican parties that they're looking for any alternative? I mean, a lot of Trump's support comes from Republicans who are totally disaffected by the Republican Party, which I think you would probably understand. You would say, okay, well, I get why they hate the Republican Party, but what I don't see is why they turn to Trump. Is that fair to say?
Well, first of all, Trump, I don't know why, I don't know why he would, he's not responsible for all of that, but what he's done is he's changed the tone of the country. He started off saying bad things about Mexican Americans, and then he's been a racist his whole life. There's no question about that. Starting with the Central Park Five and Obama being from not being born here and all that. We know he's anti-black and just anti-Muslim, anti anybody that's not like him, a white, powerful American, who has a lot of money. So, and right now we're in a position where the Republican Party is pretty much ruined, and we're in danger, I think, more than ever, of getting closer to fascism. And never has this country ever been that close to fascism as it is now. Because if Trump and his people got more power, that's the kind of country we would be living in.
Well, if they got more power because they got more votes, and it's far from clear they will. I am not a Trump defender. The question again is, to me, is he the worst ever? I don't think he comes close. I don't think the actions that he's taken put him at the very bottom of the presidential ladder, if you want to put it that way. And I think a lot of the concerns you're saying about fascism can fairly be laid at the feet of other presidents, which we'll get to. For example, and I'm not going to talk about W. Bush for a second, although there you see the unemployment rates. You can see when W left office, and you want to talk about the economy, things were getting very, very bad. That's the unemployment rate approaching 8%. We'll get to the Trump unemployment in a second. But just to stick with W for one more second, if you want to talk, well, I was going to say about Obama, you want to talk about fascism, Obama greatly increased the power of the security state, which is observing us, which is watching us, which is keeping tabs on our communications. I have real concerns about that. Obama also relied very heavily on secret courts as following in the footsteps of his predecessor, George W. Bush. Again, those to me are fascistic, and those are not the fault of Donald J. Trump.
Well, he certainly hasn't helped it any. Let's put it that way. I mean,
but is he the worst? I mean, is he clearly the worst when he
follows
those other?
Look at the country. Look at how all the hatred, all the despair, all people are not happy. They're worried.
They're not, but I think they were unhappy, and that's why they voted for Trump in the first place, because they were unhappy. He didn't make people unhappy, they were unhappy. And again, you talked about the economy. So you see a huge spike when Trump was president in his third year. That coincides exactly with COVID. So now, did Trump handle COVID well? No, I'm not going to defend it at all. It was terrible. That said, I am not prepared to say Trump handled COVID worse than Ronald Reagan handled AIDS. Ronald Reagan denied. He wouldn't even use the term. He pretended it didn't exist, or some gay cancer, because of his concerns about validating or vindicating the very, very legitimate fears of the gay community. So to me, if you want to talk about bigotry and bias, let's talk about Reagan's apparent, and I don't even think the guy was a homophobe. He had been in Hollywood for 40 years. I'm sure he had gay friends. I think it was just a pure political calculation that we're not going to address this problem because it could harm us in the heartland. So even if we talk about how bad COVID was, and the death rates in the U.S. were bad. Okay, so Schmidt, I want to say that Schmidt addressed that. He said we'd have 100,000 or 200,000 more Americans. Really bad. But you know what? There were other countries where they were just as bad. Other developed countries, Spain and Italy come to mind. Again, I think we could have had fewer deaths. But a major factor in the high death rate in the United States, in my view, and from what I've read, and this is not just based on some sort of off the top of the head is that we don't have universal single payer health coverage like the English have National Health Service, like the French, like the Japanese. We don't have that, and we have very high poverty rates. And those are two major risk factors in the high COVID death rate. You cannot blame Trump for either of those two facts.
Well, certainly Trump is not making any of those things better. He's making them all pretty much worse because, the reason people voted for him is not because of how bad Obama was or whatever. It's because he's the biggest and best con man in the world. Nobody's been more of a grifter and a con man than Donald Trump. I mean,
he's terrible. He doesn't pay his bills. It's awful. He doesn't pay his, he's always, that's a big reason for this impeachment too, is that he took forever to pay Stormy Daniels. If he had paid her before he ran for president and gotten a hush, got paid the hush money then, he wouldn't be facing at least the specific charge that was levied against him that was preferred. Those charges wouldn't have been preferred because he wouldn't have paid her with campaign funds. So I don't disagree. Trump's a sleazeball. Trump's a dirtbag. But the question is he different? Is he sui generis? Is he something very, very different than presidents we've seen in recent times and in even hundreds of years ago? And I would say absolutely not. I think even if you look at that unemployment rate, it was bad. But by the time he left office, it was already coming down. And it was well below where it was when Obama took office in the wake of W. Also, I would make another point. I would say that George W. Bush is far more responsible for the bad economy that he left to his predecessor than Trump is for the bad economy that Biden took over, which I don't think was even, it wasn't good because we have so much inequality, but unemployment wasn't rising with a bullet. Also, the banking crisis was largely due to the deregulation that both W and Obama practiced, poor oversight by W, and war on Iraq, which W pushed us into, which was an absolute disastrous war, and is one of the main reasons I think he is one of, I can't say who's the worst, but he's one of the three worst presidents in my opinion because of that war on Iraq.
Well, I'm not going to argue with you about all these, things about who's better, who's worse, and all that. It's just what Trump has left us. Trump has left us a country that's just falling apart right now, and is, like I said, it's in danger of turning into a fascist country because the Republicans have gotten so strong, and of course he's ruined the Republican Party. They're not the Republican Party anymore; they're the Trump Party, and also, another thing we have to consider is Trump is psychologically disturbed. The man is crazy. We all saw what happened, yesterday when he was indicted, and he just started criticizing everybody they could possibly think of, including the judge and the prosecutor and their families. He's just ramped up hate in this country far more than any other president has in history. And it's just only getting worse.
I just don't agree with what you just said. I may be crazy. I'm not going to get into that. I don't know. I think Trump clearly has a personality disorder. He's a narcissist. I don't think that's particularly rare for people in the White House. But let's get back to who's the worst. So this is before, just at the beginning of the Jackson presidency. I'm not blaming the tariff war against Jackson, although because he was somewhat prepared to have a compromise. But we're talking about the worst president and also defending Trump. I believe in tariffs. I think we should have tariffs. In 1828, this country was riven. You talk about a divided country. We were riven, and we were beginning to be riven by, and it would get worse and worse over the next 30 years, by slavery. And there were warring camps on the slave question and the tariff question. There were obviously warring camps on the slave question. The South wanted to keep slavery. At least the aristocrats did, the landowners and the slave owners did. And at least in the North, it was strongly opposed and became more and more opposition to slavery. Slavery, perhaps the worst, two worst crimes the U.S. has perpetrated, I would say, were what we did to the Native Americans or indigenous peoples, and also what we did to African Americans. to me, are the two greatest crimes we've committed, although we have done other things very, very badly as well.
Yeah,
so I'm a support. Go ahead.
Yeah, talk about, minority parties and more minority groups. I mean, right now they're in, as bad a shape as ever. People are, the Black people are frustrated and, with all the crime that the police, are doing to the Black people, and there's more anti-Semitism than ever. There's more hate crimes than ever. There's more, all the violence that we have. I think it's all attributed to the poison that Trump gives out, and he kind of ruins everything.
People are angry. People are bitter because they feel exploited. They feel like they're being treated wrongly, and we see that across the political spectrum. And rather than unite against the plutocracy, against the Republicrats, we have devolved into these warring factions. I again don't put that at Trump's feet. I mean, Trump is exploiting that. Well, you do. Trump, when Trump was president, he actually did lead. We did see wages rise for working people. And that did not happen relative to the rich under Obama. It did not happen when W was president, and it didn't happen when Clinton was president. It happened because of the tariffs more than any other reason. I support tariffs. Tariffs make it more expensive to bring goods in from overseas, which incentivizes corporations and employers to maintain employment or to bring jobs back to the United States. In 1828, the strongest opponents of tariffs were Southern slave owners. Labor exploiters have always hated tariffs. If you treat your workers like crap, if you don't even pay them, or if you pay them a pittance, like what we saw in Haiti, what we see in Haiti now, and you are the owner of the manufacturer, you make huge profits. You pay very little to make your good compared to your opponents, your opposition, your competitors. You can dump your cheap product overseas. So you don't like tariffs. You don't want anyone raising the price of anything because you can sell what you make or you exploit others to make at a very low price. In the American history and throughout history, people who exploit labor like free trade. They hate tariffs. John C. Calhoun was the biggest opponent of the tariff. They called the tariff of abominations because it would hurt slave owners. That's the people who oppose Trump's tariffs.
Well,
Arlen.
Look, we didn't have this debate about tariffs. We're having a debate about who's the
worst president. Trump supported tariffs. Tariffs are good. So how could he be the worst? How could he be the worst president compared to people in the past who were totally against anything that would help working people?
Hal, we haven't even talked about all the horrible, historically awful things that Trump has done, like denied an election, tried to changed the election with the insurrection at the Capitol that he encouraged and promoted.
That was really bad, Arlen. That was really bad. I am not going to defend that. But in fact, we did not have an insurrection in the sense that nobody took over government. The police actually waved them in. And I think the Democrats handled this extraordinarily poorly. I'm not going to defend what Trump did. Trump was was terrible. But the question we're getting to is, was he the worst? And why is all of this happening? And is there even value to saying, oh, he's the worst president, when clearly you can argue, and I think I am arguing much, effectively, that he wasn't the worst president. Yes, what happened to the Capitol was very bad. 4 people died, 5 people died. I'm not going to minimize that. It's really bad.
No,
does it compare with the Trail of Tears, Arlen, where 60,000 Native Americans were forced off their land, where they were suffered from exposure, disease, and starvation en route to a newly designated Indian reserve? This has been called by some a genocide.
Okay,
now, did Trump do anything that's at that level? And this is worse than Andrew Jackson, this is from the Wikipedia page.
Well, yeah, but see, I think you're totally forgetting the fact that the January 6th thing was it could have gone bad, and it could have he was trying to change, the course of the election, to overthrow a fair and free election, and to basically to ruin democracy. He was, he came that close, and a lot of people
I
believe
guess I don't know.
that way.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda. It's not good. I'm not defending it. I'm saying, is what happened on January 6th prove that Trump's easily the worst president? I believe I've shown that in terms of the economy, he wasn't the worst president. When it comes to foreign policy, he wasn't the worst president. Now we're looking at what Andrew Jackson did, because it was indeed Andrew Jackson who who was responsible for the Trail of Tears. And there you can see it. And the Trail of Tears was, although the effort, and this is important to point out, this wasn't like there was universal agreement. We all need to relocate these Native Americans and force them off the land that they've occupied for millennia. In fact, U.S. Congressman Davy Crockett, well-known Crockett, said, no, we shouldn't do this. It's wrong. And President Andrew Jackson gained congressional passage of the Indian Removal Act, which authorized the government to extinguish any Indian title to land claims in the Southeast. Okay, what did Trump do? I understand maybe we could have had fascism if Trump had been successful. I don't think that was where we were going, but okay, let's assume maybe that's true. What else did he do that compares in horror to that?
Well, there's no question that our history, there's been some pretty awful things, and criminal things that should never have happened. But that's old history. Right now, I'm worried about the future. I'm worried that we even care about having a democracy anymore, because there's these people on the right, his party, don't seem to want democracy anymore. They're just interested only in having power, and they don't care about anything else.
Well, I don't think people want democracy if it means they're going to be hungry, if they're not going to have a good job. I think that's the fear that many have.
Yeah, and what is Trump doing to help that?
I don't think Trump's been great on the economy, but again, I pointed out the tariffs. I pointed out that wages were rising for working people. I'm not going to say, again, there's some parts of the Trump legacy that I think are positive, and I already gave two: the ending wars, at least the war in Afghanistan, and also pivoting towards China and raising tariffs. I want to get back to worst president. So we'll stick with the 19th century. We'll move forward. We don't have that much time. So Let's talk about the worst justices. Trump gets a lot of criticism for his justices. Andrew Jackson appointed the worst justice in American history, Roger Brooke Taney, who delivered the infamous Dred Scott decision ruling that African Americans could not be considered U.S. citizens and Congress could not prohibit slavery in the U.S. territory. So I'm going to move quickly because we don't have a lot of time. So let's go to the next slide here. Taney continues to have a controversial reputation. I would say he does. His decision, the Dred Scott ruling, is widely considered to be the worst Supreme Court decision ever made. He was appointed, as I said, by Andrew Jackson.
Well,
so
I'm
it's
glad
hard for me to see Trump as the worst when Jackson, who was responsible for the Trail of Tears, also, I just want to say, appointed the worst Supreme Court justice of all time. And I'm going to make one more point here about Jackson, and then we can move on.
Okay.
Also, Jackson was indeed, and this is, look, for what it's worth, some people may not think of Wikipedia as a reliable site, whatever. I'm okay with you saying that, but for her history, it's pretty good. So here we go. He was a cruel slave owner who ordered a brutal, even brutal punishment. He one woman for improper conduct was ruled with a cowhide, given 50 lashes, and that might well have resulted in her death. For a man who escaped, he said, "I'll give you $10 for every 100 lashes, up to 300." So that would be, I guess, $30, which would have killed him.
Well,
so it's hard for me to see. Trump was a bad guy. Trump says mean things. Trump was abusive towards some women.
Some.
I'm not seeing, well, he wasn't to Stormy Daniels. he wasn't to Karen McDougal. Those were clearly consensual relations.
Yeah, but
So some women, not all, just like Bill Clinton was abusive to some women.
all right. I'm surprised that you brought up the Supreme Court, because that's one of the worst things that proves that Trump is the worst president ever. Because look what he did with the Supreme Court. He got his the worst possible people there, and he didn't allow Obama to pick to pick a Supreme Court justice, and then he was able to get Amy, whatever her name is, in there.
Coney Barrett.
Coney Barrett, in there. So he got 3 really atrocious Supreme Court justices in there, and that shouldn't have happened, not in the way he did it. Now it's going to be a long time before we're going to overcome that. The effect of all those right-wing presidents and they're thinking about abortion and all the other things that they're kind of over, ruining our country, taking away our rights. And
so I assume, Arlen, you would agree that perhaps the greatest crisis we face right now, despite maybe the crisis in democracy, which I think is a problem. I don't put it in the same place as you do, but clearly I think we can agree that the environmental cataclysm is at the top, right? If it's not the biggest problem we face, it's clearly one of them.
it's a big one, Hal. And
All right.
of course, Trump has totally ignored it.
So you brought up the justices. Can you see the slide I just put up? I'm not trying to be like, gotcha.
Yeah, I see Gorsuch and Kavanaugh.
What do? They stand up for the rights of an environmental activist who was subject to a fascistic court proceeding where the judge, a Federalist Society judge, and by the way, Kavanaugh was in the Federalist Society, a Federalist Society right-wing judge in New York, appointed a special prosecutor from a law firm associated with the Chevron Corporation to prosecute an environmental activist, because the U.S. Justice Department under Donald Trump said, we're not going there. We're not going to prosecute this guy. We don't think he committed contemptuous behavior. We're not going to prosecute him. So the judge said, okay, you won't do it. I'm going to have a private law firm do it under a little used New York state law. 7 of 9 justices said, that's fine, no problem, nothing to see here. The only 2 who said no to fascism, no to having a judge whose jury and executioner were the first 2 justices that Trump appointed, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. Sonia Sotomayor did not.
All right. So
Elena Kagan did not, and neither did Jackson. I forget her last name now. She has 2 last names.
Okay, you're really fishing
from
to
Harvard
find
Law School.
Good things to say about those justices.
It's not a good thing to say. They did it, Arlen. That's what they did.
I don't want to take, don't want to take one particular case. I agree with you that particular case you were talking about.
Pretty important case. It's a damn important case, saying that a judge doesn't get to appoint a special prosecutor. And not only that, not only is it an important case, but also they were the only ones who said no. It wasn't like the liberal justices who could have, Ketanji, by the way, Brown Jackson is her name. Sorry, I forgot it for a moment. She was the one justice appointed by Biden. So again, we just saw the worst justice of all time was appointed by the guy who also slaughtered Indians and treated slaves like slaves. And then you see 2 justices by Trump who actually bucked the right-wing fascistic decision. I don't know how I'm going to say he's the worst president under these circumstances.
Well, you could take one thing that they may have done right. I don't know, but there's been like 9,000 things they've done wrong. They're starting to take away rights. The first rights that we've ever had that have been taken away from us, namely the abortion.
Well, it's not our first right. The abortion right is not our first right, but I don't like the abortion decision whatsoever. I'm with you there, Arlen.
Almost everything.
Terrible decision.
Anything that the Supreme Court gets involved with now, they mess it up because they're totally in the hands of the right wing, the Federalist Society. And
you think that these justices that Trump not appointed, even including Coney Barrett, who I do not have any truck with. You think they're worse than Clarence Clarence Thomas, or Scalia, who's dead now, or Alito, or
Yeah,
I
but they're
mean,
in the same group, Hal. There's the same kind
agreed. But in fact, I disagree with that. I don't agree with that. I agree that Coney Barrett is clearly Gorsuch and Kavanaugh do have some practice judicial restraint when it comes to cases where the right wing is pretty invested.
Well, I certainly don't want them to be in charge of any laws that I'm bringing forward, because it's going to be, totally in favor of the rich people, totally in favor of, conservatives, and because that's who they're loyal to, and that they're loyal to the rich people, not ordinary working people, just like Trump is the same way. Trump only cares about, rich people and people who have means, and he doesn't,
but to
he
be
doesn't care about
fair,
working people.
well, to be fair, the neoliberal agenda totally hates tariffs, and Wall Street wants the wars that Trump has tried to get us out of, or not get us involved in. So I don't think it's fair to just simply state definitively that Trump is on the side of the rich. It's just not. If that were the case, then the rich would be on his side, and many of them are not.
Well, let's not forget, they're doing very well. They've improved their standings. They've gotten trillions of dollars more than they should have, and we're at the point now where we have three individuals who have more wealth than the bottom 50% of our country. Three individuals.
Is that Trump's fault, though?
Yes, he's made it worse.
I don't see how. I don't see how it is.
He has, certainly he's not complaining about it.
I don't like his tax policy. Of course, we should raise taxes on the wealthy, but Amazon and Bezos, the Bezos newspaper, the Washington Post, hates Trump. They've done everything possible to bring him down, and one of the big reasons for that is Amazon's profits have come in large part from bringing cheap goods in from China, and Trump has made those goods more expensive. So whatever you think, and I, of course, I think that the estate tax that Bezos should pay should be much higher, and his income tax should be much higher, and Trump doesn't. But Democrats haven't done much at all to rein in the rich and powerful either, which is one of the reasons that some poor struggling people have turned to Trump, and many working people have. Also, you talk about racism being a factor. I think it's a factor. I don't disagree with that. But it's also true that Trump's share of the black vote went up slightly, and his share of the Latino vote went up significantly between 2016 and 2020.
Well, he's fooled a lot of people. There's no doubt about that. There's about 35% of the country has been fooled by him into thinking that he's, this great president, when in fact he's,
Do they think he's great? Or, I mean, one of the reasons, a lot of the people who voted for Trump actually were Obama voters first. They were Obama to Trump voters. I've talked to some of them. They were swayed in part by his talk about trade. There also is evidence, and I think it's pretty damn good evidence, that Trump won because of his trade position, which was very popular in the three swing states that he won: Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And also because of his anti-war statements, his anti-Iraq war statements, and his anti-military statements, which went over very big in some of the same community, or in communities in those same states where there were high percentages of families with members who were in the military and had served in tour of duty after tour of duty, seeing no hope of relief, many of whom were casualties.
Yeah, but I think it's people voted for Trump because he's the biggest con man ever in the history of this.
I'm just saying that that wasn't the reason. I just gave you evidence that wasn't the case.
I don't think you're right. They thought that Trump would drain the swamp and do all these wonderful things and change the course of the way things were going, and everything pretty much comes down to, hey, what's good for me, Trump was saying.
But that's true for everybody. But that's why people vote. I mean, I hate to say it, that's why people vote. It's very rare that you have presidents who are able to inspire people to go beyond what they view as their own interests. I think Obama did do that, by the way. I want to give him credit, but he didn't govern that way. He consistently governed in ways that were at best neutral for poor, struggling, and working people, and were very beneficial to the rich and powerful. Even Obamacare, which I am mixed on, did in fact put healthcare even more solidly in the grasp of a few of the billionaire class.
Well, look, Obama did not do all the things that he should have, but he's about 1,000 times better than Trump because he gave us hope, and he gave us some policies that would change the course of our economy and all kinds of made.
I think he gave people hope, and I think in the end,
Yeah.
a lot of those hopes were dashed, Arlen, by Obama. I'm sorry to say.
Well, yeah, and Republicans. I mean, more so
Okay. Well,
Republicans.
all right, but then why didn't he go after them to a greater degree? And why didn't he also go after Democrats who were not on board his policies? And I think you really understate. And I think one of the reasons we have a disagreement, I have this disagreement with many, is because many, not me, but many underestimate the value of tariffs and the harm that free trade has caused our nation. All right, worse than Nixon, the 73 Chilean coup d'etat was the result of an economic war ordered by U.S. President Richard Nixon and led by Pinochet, who seized power with the assistance of Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. The Nixon administration, which worked to create the conditions for the coup, which overturned a democratically elected socialist president, installed a military tyrant who murdered thousands, not millions, tens of thousands of people, Richard M. Nixon. So was W worse than Nixon? And you were.
You could go through our whole history and find a lot of terrible things that the United States have done, and the people, the presidents have allowed it to happen. But I think, in the end, it's going to be Trump who's going to make things worse and much worse than they are now. And we're heading in the very bad direction right now. And I think Trump has a lot to do with it. He, made people full of hate and anger and distrust. I mean, you got half the country who won't even talk to the other half of the country because
it goes both ways. There's so much contempt for Republicans on the coasts. For example, the Hillary Clinton deplorables line. I mean, I've heard many people say, well, it's maybe she shouldn't have said it, but it's true. There is a feeling among many, I'm not saying you, Arlen, there's a feeling among many that the Republican voter is just some horrible, unreconstructed racist, and we can't even talk to them. And that I don't think you can blame on Trump.
Oh, I think
you might want to.
much.
Oh, really? You can blame
because
him for the attitudes of the coastal elites?
Yeah, because he's the one that's turned people against the coastal elites. And, he tries to encourage.
No, but the coastal elites are the ones who are demonstrating such contempt for poor, struggling, and working people.
Well, I think the coastal elites are doing better than, most of the red states.
Well, they're living better. They have a better quality of life. I'll give you that.
And they're not, the red states are just, getting more violent and more pro-gun. And, that has a lot to do with, Trump not even doing anything about, never did anything about, gun control or anything like that.
I mean, George W. Bush was completely opposed to any kind of gun control. Let's get back, though. Worse than Nixon. In 1969, Nixon president, 4 years of carpet bombing Eastern Cambodia. They led to 150 to 500,000 civilians, zero military objective there. If anything, it turned Cambodia, much as we saw Libya later on under the Obama presidency, into a desert, into a vacuum, into a void, which was filled by Pol Pot, and millions were killed. So again, what the hell did Trump do? If he's the worst president, that means he does the worst things. I can't see it any other way. If you're the best baseball player, you hit the most home runs, you create the most runs, you win the most games. That's how we determine the best baseball player. I don't know how we don't determine the best, and I'm trying to get myself solidly in my hammer. I'm having a lot of trouble with it. I don't know how we don't determine the worst president by who does the worst things. That was really, really awful. We talked about Pinochet. Now we can talk just briefly about Cambodia. Nothing, in my opinion, that Trump did, especially Trump, an anti-war president, kind of compares with what Nixon did. in Cambodia. And
Yeah,
horrible.
we've had some very bad presidents, Hal. There's no question about that. And we've done some very bad things. And you know, that's history, and that's what we have to, you know, live with. And that's part of the American.
So are you
history.
back? And I don't mean to be a dick about it. I really don't. But
Good.
I think that part of the reason that there's so much divisiveness, Arlen, that you're talking about is because of people who say Trump is easily the worst president of all time. It sets a tone with people who may totally disagree. They'll say, well, you know what, my job, I kept my job, or my family, my wife came back from Afghanistan because of Trump. I think when you say things like he's easily the worst president of all time, it creates the conditions that, or it certainly exacerbates the very conditions that you're decrying, that you say Trump is responsible for.
Well, he gives evidence all the time that he doesn't care about making this country better or greater.
Well,
He
do
don't
you
care about
though?
himself.
I mean, I think you do. I do. But do you think when you're saying Trump is easily the worst president of all time, do you think that's helps us get to a better place where maybe we can work together, we can cross party lines and work with folks, or does it only exacerbate that divide that
Well,
you and
you
I
know,
both decry?
That's the subject of this, you know, hour. So, you know,
Well, it's not. I mean, the subject of this hour is he the worst? Because I would say the truth matters more than anything else. If Trump is indeed the worst president, I'll say we got to call him out. I mean, I do, but I think history matters. And I think that if we're going to say somebody's the worst, we better have evidence that he does. So two things that that Nixon did that were absolutely horrific. Pinochet in Chile installing this military tyrant who killed tens of thousands of people and turned that country into a dictatorship. Carpet bombing Cambodia, turning that country into a void and ultimately a disaster for the entire Southeast Asian area, and perhaps, you know, certainly turning Vietnam into a communist country as well. And then let's get to Watergate. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. You had a question about.
Has there ever been, you know, a president that tried to overturn an election who denied that he lost and tried to do also kind of corrupt things?
We had a president who if he didn't authorize a break-in, wink, wink, nudged it when he had his team break into the Democratic Party's National Committee offices.
Yeah, but what Trump did is way worse because he got about 30% of the country not even believing in the election anymore. You know, he's really made a mess of democracy in this country as far as people, you know.
I don't know what's worse. I mean, if you want to go about making a mess of democracy, it's commissioning a felony, which is what apparently Nixon did. And if he didn't commission it, he basically said, like a kingpin does, I don't want to know what you do. And then finding out shortly thereafter. And again, remember, the election was in November of 72. The break-in occurred, let me make sure I get the right date, June of 92. I want to make sure I get this right. The break-in occurred June of 92, June 17th. By, let's see, there it is. By June 23rd, Arlen, a week later, Nixon learned about, at the latest, he was already starting to cover it up.
Yeah, well, we know there's a lot of really bad presidents. And isn't it interesting that they're pretty much all Republicans? I mean,
well, Jackson was a Democrat.
Like that's Trump's party, Republican.
Well, Andrew Jackson was a Democrat. And I'm not going to, and I agree with you, Republican presidents have been worse, but I think many of the things that Barack Obama did were absolutely awful, and I've already raised them. I'm not going to say he's worse than Trump. I think that's a weak case. I don't think I win that argument. I don't necessarily even say, I won't say, I think I do win the argument that Jackson, Nixon, and W. Bush were worse. But I get you disagree. But I don't want to bring in another president who I think was really, really bad in a lot of ways, but in other ways wasn't so bad. I don't see a lot of redeeming qualities in the Jackson, Nixon, or Bush presidencies, the second Bush. I do see some in Obama. I don't want to bring him into this conversation because I also know that people that I might be able to persuade or at least get them to reconsider the argument that Trump is the worst may be swayed by my arguments and supported claims that Jackson, Nixon, and Bush were worse, W. Bush were worse. They won't be with Obama, and they'll call me racist for even bringing it up. So I'm not going to make that argument and lose when I think I can win on stronger arguments. All right, let's get to
Obama tried to do some good things to help people, help working.
He did, and I think that's fair to say. So did I think it's fair to say Trump did too. But I don't want to make it. But this isn't about Trump. Worse than George W. Bush. So by the way, we're over an hour. I hope that's okay, Arlen. Am I giving you enough time to talk, or am I cutting you off too much?
Well, you certainly do get your share of talk in there, and it's hard for me to get in sometimes, but that's okay as long as I get a chance to talk like I'm doing right now. And it's a great topic, and the way the country is right now is, I feel it's really in a bad shape, and I think it's because Trump has pretty much poisoned the whole country, in my opinion.
Well, here's the way I think you can. Okay, and I want to respond to that. I was out in Eastern Maryland a few years ago when Trump, I think he was still president. I could be wrong. Either he was still president or maybe Biden. No, he was still president. And I went into this store in this rural community, and I guess there were some Confederate flags on sale, and it was clearly for sale. It was clearly a Republican store owner. And I was wearing a Bernie for President button or something, and he starts asking me about that. So he says, and I said, he said, why are you in town? So he says, well, I'm actually an organizer. I'm a progressive organizer. Didn't say Democratic. And he said, so you don't like Trump? And I said, I'm not a Trump supporter, no, but I didn't like Obama either, because I was trying to find common ground, and I certainly didn't like Hillary Clinton. So he says to me, well, name something really bad that Trump did. So I said, the way he treats immigrants at the border is awful. To separate families is inexcusable, and it's absolutely wrong. So he said to me, well, Obama did the same thing. So he said, I think it was really bad what Obama did also, but it wasn't quite as bad. Trump's done worse. He separated more families. And my understanding is that the Obama administration made a much more significant effort to keep families together. All that said, yes, Obama did bad things too. So then he and I talked some more, and we were able to get, I think, to some understanding. He listened to what I had to say. He did not bash Bernie. I've had arguments with people who bash Bernie, and it's very hard for me to get around those people, because when I talk about healthcare and stuff, a lot of people say, yes, we do need healthcare, even Republicans. Again, I think you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. I think if you can find common ground with people, that's how you can tamp down the constant acrimony that we're seeing.
Yeah, of course, I agree with that, and I think we all want that, but I don't think Trump is doing anything to help it. He's certainly making it worse, in my opinion. He's trying to pit one group against another group all the time, and
okay,
not helping.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but I would say it this way then. As a Democrat, which you are, and I am sort of quasi, although perhaps leaving it, I think, again, we're going to find it more likely to reach common ground with people who don't agree with us and who don't vote the way we do and who we want on our side, if we can come up with areas of agreement and not just bash their guy. Just like when they start bashing our guy, even as much, I mean, I'm fine with it, because I'll just be like, yeah, you have a good point about Hillary. She's not trustworthy. She is a liar. But that doesn't make Trump any good. So I think you have to be willing, and I think you get much farther if you're willing to recognize that if you're a Democrat, you're living in a glass house, and it's not a good idea to throw stones.
Well, we all want to get along together and be in agreement. And by the way, Hillary was treated so horribly. I mean, she was bashed, lock her up all the time, when he did so much worse things than she did, as far as taking documents and spreading. Hillary at least had some good ideas and good plans, and he made he convinced a lot of people that she was like the worst person in the world and a real criminal. And I think that was
I
horrible.
don't think she had good ideas or good plans. I think she was responsible for
compared to
turning Libya. I think she was responsible for turning Libya into a terrorist training zone and slave trading center more than anybody else. She persuaded Obama against, I think, a lot of his instincts to support the air raids against Gaddafi and depose him. And that led to absolute disaster. She supported the war on Iraq. She supported most favored nations status for China. She lied about Bernie repeatedly. I find very little positive to say about Hillary Clinton. She lied about her server. But let's just, and again, just real quick, I just want to wrap up with worst president. Bin Laden determined to strike in U.S. This was on August 6th, a month before 9/11, well, over a month. Bush's administration shrugged off warnings and even months earlier ignored warnings that an attack was coming. That's pretty bad, Arlen. I mean, that's really, really bad. So again, I'm kind of at a loss to see how Trump is easily worse than W.
Just look around you. That's all I can say is look around you at the way the country is now and all the hate and anger and division. And that's a lot of it is responsible. Trump is responsible for, in my opinion.
All right. Well, I just want to get through this because I spent a lot of time and energy putting this slide deck together. So I want to just quickly get it in there. Worse than W, the war that W started on false pretenses led to 150 to over 1 million Iraqi deaths. 61%, at least in the first few years, were civilian deaths. And then, of course, the domino effect included Al-Qaeda becoming much more powerful and displacement of over 3 million Iraqis. So incredibly devastating. I don't think anything Trump did comes close to that in terms of the harm it did to our country or the world. And just to make, hammer that point in, the rationale that the Bush administration presented was weapons of mass destruction and harboring and supporting Al-Qaeda. In fact, no evidence of any relationship between Saddam and Al-Qaeda. Saddam was their enemy. Because we destroyed Iraq and killed Saddam Hussein, Al-Qaeda became much more powerful. And indeed, there were no WMDs either. So
yeah, of course, that was one of the worst things that has ever happened in the United States history. Iraq, that was totally unnecessary war, and all the things you're saying about it is true. And of course, you got to give Dick Cheney some of the credit for that too. But it was totally unnecessary and kind of
it was terrible what Cheney did, but of course Cheney was empowered by Bush. I mean, he was Bush's choice. I don't think the fact that Cheney may have made Bush even worse than he might have been on his own is kind of an excuse, is a defense of Bush, is all I would say, being, excusing him being the worst president or one of the three worst in my opinion. And then you get to the torture. And, I mean, the next few slides, quick trigger alert. I should put it on trigger alert. I just think this is really important when we talk about the worst president ever. We see what these people did. And this is what George W. Bush authorized. This is what happened when he was president. I don't think, if you want to talk about destroying our democracy, we don't have a democracy when we're doing this. So yeah. I can't,
Well, you won't get me to disagree with you, Hal. All those things are horrible and terrible, and we've had some terrible presidents with terrible policies. I just think of it but right now we're just in about as worse shape as a country as we've ever been, and I think Trump has a lot to do with it.
Well, I really appreciate what I believe to be, and maybe you disagree, Arlen, a amicable, respectful dispute over something that I think is actually very important, because I think, as you said, we do want to move forward where we can come to some agreements and work with people who may have different views on a host of issues. So whether Trump is easily the worst president or arguably the worst president or simply a president who did bad things like a lot of other presidents, and at least when it comes to Jan 6 was particularly out of line, frightening. I mean, I'm willing to accept any of those terms, but the extreme statement, or the what the word is when you're the ultimate statement that he's easily the worst, I cannot endorse.
Yeah, but I agree with you, Hal, that it's a good discussion because we could agree to disagree and still be friends, and get our point across, and that's what it should be all about.
Do you have a final word you want to throw in there? Because I do, and Arlen, and now I'm talking some more, but I will let you get your final point in. I do try, and I've had guests, and I'm very proud of this fact. I'm going to pat myself on the back. I'm very proud of the fact that my guests have generally said they really appreciate that. Yes, I push back. Yes, I take issue with things they say, but I also give them an opportunity to defend their position, and I don't do it or at least I try very hard not to, and generally don't do it in an insulting or dismissive way. So rather than, I mean, if you want to weigh on that, you can, but I don't think you need to. I'm not asking you to. I am saying you get a final, minute or two or whatever you want to present your position.
Well, yeah, I think you do give people a chance to talk, but I gotta say, Hal, you dominate the conversation. I mean, if you look at the amount of time that you have talking compared to your guests, I think you'll see a big difference. But all in all, you have a good show. You bring up important topics, and I hope the show continues to grow. I hope people will pay attention to it, and subscribe and like and all that kind of stuff, because we need more good conversation in this country. Whereas right now it's all right wing one side, left wing another side, but it's talking about political issues is just in a very bad shape in this country, and we need more like yours, where people get a chance to talk on both sides.
We'll have you back again soon, Arlen, if you'll join me, and you can always let me know if you have something on your mind that you'd like to discuss. If I haven't reached out to you in a bit, but I will reach out as well. Arlen Grossman, thebigpicturereport.com. Arlen said it. I'll say it again. Like the video, click subscribe in the bottom right where it says Hal, tick subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow. Have a great afternoon or morning if you're on the left coast.